Usually when you download models to use, you'll have to do a little bit of setup to make sure that any textures you downloaded are properly connected, and also making sure all the shaders are of the correct type. With this model that I downloaded, when I imported it in, it would look like it was just gray shaded, which is unusual because it came with textures. So I'll go through how to reconnect those. If I go into the folder that I set up for project 1, inside the project directory, in the source images is where I stored all of the textures. They're in a subfolder called Medieval Building. Now, when you're starting to download lots of models, you'll want to make sure to create a different subfolder for them in source images so they stay organized. Going back into Maya, in the Hypershade, there are two tabs, Materials and Textures. The textures will show all of the paths that are supposed to be connected here. If I select one of these and go into the attribute editor, looking at the first part of the path, this is something that was set up by the original artist, and it's not a path that exists on my computer. If I go back to this folder with all the textures in it, I can see it's in Project 1, Source Images, Medieval Building. Maya is smart enough to figure out if something's inside the project folder, so I can click on here, and I want to copy everything after Project 01, so that's Source Images and Medieval Building. And I just hit Control C. I'm going to go back into the Hypershade, and under image name, I'm going to highlight everything before the image name and hit Control V and hit Enter. So that brings that back, and I'm going to do that for each of the files here. This is a little tedious, but you'll only have to do this once. After doing that, I'm going to do File, Increment, and Save. I don't want to have to do that again. So now I can see all of the textures in view, and I'm going to go to the Arnold render view. I can't see anything, so I'll set up a sky dome light here. Now that looks really wrong, and we want to figure out why. If I go back into the Hypershade and look at the materials, select any one of them, I can see here that the material type is Fong. Because we're using the Arnold renderer, we want to make sure that all of the shaders are Arnold, which means we need them to be of type AI standard surface. Looking through the rest of these, it looks like none of them are the correct type. Luckily, Arnold does provide a conversion script, so if you go into the Arnold menu, go to Utilities, and convert shaders to Arnold. Hit all. So it did something, but it still doesn't look right. And the reason for that is that this script is still a little buggy, and there's one more thing you'll have to do to get the textures to show up. The issue here is that there's an attribute called coat that is set to 1. This is kind of creating a sheen on top of everything, and for some reason when the script was created, it didn't account for this. But it's a pretty easy fix. So if I go select any one of these and then set the coat weight to 0, that kind of restores the look that's supposed to be there. I'll do that for each of these. That lets the actual color peek through. This could get a little tedious to do, so there is a faster way to do it. I'm going to just shift select each of these. And I'm only selecting the ones that are Arnold. If you go into Windows, General Editors, Attribute Spreadsheet, that's just letting you see the attributes of everything that you've selected in spreadsheet form, and it makes it easier to change things in batch. In here, I'm under the All tab, and there's an attribute filter at the top where I can type in attribute names to search for them. In this case, it would be coat. Now I can see that some of these are set to 0 and set to 1. I want them all to be 0, so I can select the whole column, hit 0. And now that looks how it should. When you download models to build your environment, you have two options. If they came with textures already, you could try to bring them into Maya and then convert the shaders to AI standard surface. Or you could rebuild the textures from scratch by creating your new AI standard surfaces and then painting your own textures.